The Division has no story. This is one of those comments that I receive in a similar way to a lot of people who get the "this game is dead" statement. While I don't necessarily think it's for everyone, in this video I'm going to explain why I think the way The Division tells the story, as well as many other games like it, is actually the best way to do it. Regarding the story at the very most basic level, I think we could group gamers into these three categories. No story, those who don't really care about the story at all and solely focus on the gameplay. Setting, those who need a decent setting in order to spark interest in the game, but place a larger emphasis on gameplay. All story, those who place an equal amount of importance on the story and gameplay. Obviously, this is super oversimplifying it. Larger publishers will have marketing teams that could break this down several more times. But in the interest of keeping this video concise, let's just stick to these three. Now, I won't pretend that I know the ratio of players around each of these, and to be fair, I'd say this varies quite considerably depending on the genre and game. Also, I don't necessarily think that everyone sits bang on each of these categories. A lot likely sit somewhere in between. To further explain this, I'll use myself as an example. I sit right in the middle with a new game. I'm a gamer who seeks a little bit of immersion before I can get into it, but I'm certainly more concerned about the gameplay to start with. It needs to be fun. We're playing a video game after all. It should be entertaining. However, once I've established that I like the gameplay, that's when I would probably start moving down towards the all-story category. The longer I play the game, the more I want to be able to dig up. Without a decent story, my attention begins to wander. It's probably worth noting at this point that I'm basing this on live service games. I know this is apparently a bad word among a lot of popular content creators, but for me personally, I'm a fan. I've been playing games for a long time, and the idea of a game and franchise that is constantly evolving appeals far more than single playthrough games these days. I love that time spent, regardless of how little time I have, can be shown in-game, whether that be experience, gear, limited time collectibles, etc. This is part of the gameplay experience that I look for. I want to put 1,000 hours into a game, not just 20 to 40. The Division tells a story in a way that began with a powerful marketing campaign that really set the scene, with a number of videos that talked about the situation at hand in a way that almost seemed like real life, as it tied in with a number of things that actually played out in the past. Yet, when the game finally came out, we were greeted with a strong opening trailer, and then, that was pretty much it. For the most part, the rest of the story played out in the agent earpiece, while running through the world or playing missions. On top of this, there are collectibles that you can stumble across or actively hunt out, and this is where the depth of the story comes from. These would play automatically when you pick them up in-game, but you have the option to listen to them again through your catalogue. The Division 2 followed a similar pattern until seasons were introduced. With them, the comms were given while running through, no hunting down required, and the same goes with Descent and other activities like the Incursion. The information and world building kept piling through. Let's go back to those three categories for a second. Based on what I just talked about with The Division, it would be fair to say that two of these groups would assume that there is maybe a good setting, but there has been very little in the way of story since the beginning. And this is fair. If you don't really care about it, why put the work into hunting it out and collecting the intel that tells a story? I'm pretty sure if you asked someone from this category what the game is about, they'd probably say it's something about a virus and a guy named Alex. I think there would even be a decent number of people from this category that would dislike the way the Division story is told, and maybe rely on some Kiwi dude with a monotone voice to piece everything together. But let's flip it around for a second. What if we talk about a game that is very heavy on story? Starfield. I only bring this one up because it was the first one that came to mind and the most recent game of this type that I've played. There are tons of better examples, but I think this still works. It's a good game and was generally well received by the gaming community, but it does isolate a few of these groups. I am a story player, and I still got frustrated with the number of dialogue cuts, and the heavy focus on run to this guy to talk to this guy about this other guy because he said mean things about the first guy. Eventually, I ended up just skipping the lines and lines of talking by smashing the spacebar over and over, just to rush through the NPC interactions. And let's face it, the only thing you should be smashing is that like and subscribe button to support this channel. Yeah, that was probably the cheesiest, most YouTuber douchebaggery shit that I've ever said on this channel. Well, sadly it probably isn't. Regardless, I make no apologies. Anyway, I felt like I was spending more time listening to voice actors than playing the game. I played for maybe 40 hours, and that was an absolute slog to get there. But it isn't because I thought the game was bad, it just really wasn't the right game for me. And I can imagine there are a lot of other players, even less focused on the story, that felt much the same, although maybe in a far less polite way. Games like The Division and Destiny, who keep their story deep without forcing it into the face of everyone who plays the game, are keeping the game more viable for a larger number of players. At the end of the day, especially for live service titles, we want our favourite games to be popular enough that they continue to be supported by the studios. So for the people who don't give a crap about the story, not to be bothered about constant cutscenes and dialogue, and for those who don't really care to begin with, but may be swayed once they hit their stride with the gameplay and mechanics. Then of course the ones who place just as much importance on the story as the gameplay, there is still a ton to dig up and construct. I know I said earlier that this third group could be split up several more times, and that a good chunk of them would prefer to have everything in the story played out in front of them. And that's cool, I understand this. This would be your classic single-player story mode games. I've played a ton of them, I get it. But times are changing. Attention spans are dropping. Short-style videos are up, full-length videos are down, etc. Studios need to cater to this change in order to get the player base to justify continued support. There will always be a place for primarily story-focused games. I just believe that their audience will only get smaller over time. I actually feel like the games who don't throw the whole story in front of you are able to go into considerably more depth because they aren't constrained with the gameplay story balance issue. Yes, you may not get all of the pretty cinematics, but if I wanted more cinematics than gameplay, I go watch a movie. Plus, I love when something is found several years after the game releases. That changes everything we thought we knew about a situation. I actually reached out to Lauren Stone, the narrative director on The Division, just to get her thoughts on what I've been discussing here, and she summed it up far more elegantly than I could. The narrative cannot get in the way of the gameplay, especially in multiplayer. We are conditioned to believe that it only counts as story if it's in a cutscene, that you can hold A to skip. That's a really expensive way to make it really easy to skip the story. The way we tell story in The Division is not linear. It's not plot-driven, it's character-driven. Character is king because people are constantly evolving and changing how we see the world evolves by our knowledge and perspective. I treat the story as its own game mechanic. It's for the analysts, for the people who want to understand the world so they can save what remains, because they know what is worth saving. And the more grounded we can make these stories, and those stories serve the mediums we are working in, the more we can build this universe we have created. It's why we make comics, novels, audio dramas, and are working on Redacted. Every medium has its limitations, and I look at those constraints as opportunities and try to build these products in a way that supports one another while being independent. For the story nerds, when this is all over, I hope you love what we've done and like the story in the game. You don't need to experience everything to enjoy anything, but if you're a completionist like me, the transmedia will become more and more relevant as we move forward. I like the comment you made around being conditioned to believe it only counts as story if it's in a cutscene, and I think this is exactly where the X game has no story movement has come from. Games in general are changing. The sheer size and complexity of them has grown exponentially over the last couple of decades. But equally, so have our expectations as gamers. Studios are having to employ hundreds, if not thousands of developers in order to keep a single title supported. And at the same time, they're a business, so need to turn a profit. If this is the future of storytelling and gaming, and I honestly think it is for the larger AAA titles, I'm actually all for it. Yes, we have a few less cutscenes, but the detail we are gaining in turn is of far greater value to me, and that's without considering all of the transmedia coming out these days. Believe it or not, this video was originally intended to be a YouTube short, but making anything under 60 seconds seems to be a challenge for me these days. Before I close this video, I wanted to say a huge thank you to everyone. This is well overdue. The channel hit 100,000 subscribers last month. In fact, I think it's sitting at 117,000 as of writing this. Given how seldom I upload, and the fact that I break almost every single YouTube algorithm rule, it blows my mind that the channel has made it this far. I also really need to recognise the support I've received from Ubisoft ANZ and, well, actually a whole bunch of Ubisoft studios, especially Massive Entertainment. I won't name everyone because I'll definitely miss someone, but you know who you are, both past and present. When I first started talking to, working with, and visiting the team at Massive, I think I was at barely 8,000 subs. I was in a position where I wasn't actually sure whether I was going to continue with this whole YouTube thing. But they, indirectly, taught me not to be afraid of being unique, to be myself. You may not grow as fast as the typical channel to begin with, but you'll have a hell of a lot more fun along the way. Do what makes you happy. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this one up. If you made it this far, thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you soon in the next one. Cheers!